I'm Courtney and I'm here with my April wrap-up. Let's get right into it. So, first of all, my DNF. I DNF'd Perdido Street Station after 427 pages. It's by China Miéville. On the back it says it's this awesome story about this scientist who has been approached by a Garuda, which is a kind of humanoid bird thing, that asks him to create something that will make him be able to fly. Sounds really cool. When you get into the book, it's about that, and it's also about our main character Isaac's girlfriend Lynn, who is this strange beetle-headed artist, and you're led to believe that this could be, a really cool, interesting story. There's lots of different interesting characters, really well written, and then about 300 pages from the end, it kind of like a whole author takes over, a whole different author, and he lets the plot get away from him. It suddenly turns into like a horror crime novel. The writing goes downhill. I looked up the end and it was just like, okay, I'm done. I'm still reading Midnight's Children. I'm about 200 pages from the end there. I'm really enjoying the writing. It's a story that correlates one child's life to the India and Pakistan and Bangladesh after their independence from England. On to what I did finish. I read a play, Lady Windermeres Fan by Oscar Wilde. This is a typical Oscar Wilde play from what I've read, about miscommunication and not telling the truth, which leads to complicated relationships. Then I read 15 children's picture books in the Serendipity series by Stephen Cosgrove, and I really enjoyed this nostalgic trip, let me tell you. I read these books in the late 80s and early 90s when I was a kid. They're moral stories with wonderful, colorful illustrations that have to do with everything from cleaning up your room to death. As for the novels I finished No Crystal Stair by May Ruth Sarsfield, which is a Canadian novel. It's a snapshot of a black community in a Montreal neighborhood in the 1930s and 1940s. And I say snapshot rather because there's not really a plot or a lot going on with the characters. So I wouldn't read it if that's what you're looking for, but I did learn a lot about the different ways in which racism manifested itself in Canada in this time period. Then I read Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. That's the story of Okonkwo, who lives in a village in Nigeria, and it's basically his life story, and it's told in a very simplistic language that kind of mimics a fable or a folktale, but with a more, complicated moral structure. For the first half of the book, we get Okonkwo and village life, and the second half of the book, Christian missionaries have come to the village. It's interesting because Achebe doesn't shy away from presenting village life in a negative way. Both the original village beliefs and everything and the Christian beliefs are shown unbiasedly. Then I read Wittgenstein's Mistress by David Markson, which was a brain workout, let me tell you. It doesn't seem like it if you just read it on the surface. Where it gets complicated is where you look at the philosophy and try to mesh that with the story, but with the fact that it is a book itself. Because it's about solipsism, which is like, I think, therefore I am, very basically, I'm the only thing that I can know that exists. And it's about a woman who's convinced that she's the last living being on Earth. And it's just her thought. She's sitting at a typewriter, just typing out whatever comes into her mind, whether it has to do with art, music, philosophy, a bit of her past life. And it's a really interesting experiment on loneliness, on what human purpose is if there's no one there to witness what we leave behind, especially in regards to art, music, literature, etc. And an interesting experiment on a mind falling apart. Then I read Jacob Have I Loved by Catherine Patterson, which is about a young girl growing up on a small island off the coast of Maine. And it's mostly about her relationships with the people around her, her twin sister, which is where we get the Jacob have I loved, Jacob and Esau biblical story. It's really interesting because she spends a lot of time in her head, and she's full of anger and disappointment, and it's really interesting to see that, but it doesn't manifest itself outside of her, and she doesn't realize that, and that's a really, really important message to get across, even as an adult, but I think it would be particularly good for the middle grade audience that it is geared towards. It's a very kind of melancholy book, but also very beautiful. And then I read a bunch of comics. I went on a bit of a binge. So all in all, I read 4.5 novels. I DNF'd one. I read 472 pages of that though, so then I read 15 children's books, 6 comics, a play, and I forgot to mention I'm about halfway through Memory of Light by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. I have a lot of thoughts on that, so I won't get into it right now, but I plan on finishing that in May. Okay, let me know what you read in April, and thank you for watching.